Hi, I'm Stina.
And I'm Father Burns.
And this is the Living Fullness podcast. On this episode, we're going to begin a 3-part book study on the book Gift and Grit by Dr. Andrew and Sarah Swafford.
If you're new here on the Living Fullness podcast, we chat about virtues and cultural shifts and trends and growing in the spiritual life, and we are delighted to have you join us. So this book that we're looking at today, the book of Andrew and Sarah Swafford, a husband and wife team who have written this book together. The very nature of Gift and Grit is that it's aimed to help the reader reflect on the most essential questions that the Swaffords have encountered asking many young people in their own ministry, particularly in university ministry. And also just themselves growing up and seeing, the questions that have sort of impacted on their own lives as well. Questions like, who am I? What am I living for? What gives my life meaning? Am I worth the difficult fight that lies ahead to grow in virtue? And an important point is made by the Swaffords that, yes, life is a journey, and we frequently hear that phrase. In fact, it's so frequently used that it kind of makes me want to hurl quite frequently. It's one of those phrases. Life's a journey. Yes, fine. Life's a journey. But they make an important point, one that I think actually redeems the statement that life is a journey. And it's this, that life is a journey and I am becoming a certain kind of person along the way. So the journey matters. The journey, in fact, is a drama, right? The journey has weight and it matters. And so these questions that they pose, these questions that sort of form part of the journey and drama that is human existence, heavy as they may feel, they help us to ask the questions, who am I and where am I headed?
I think from there, one of the things we need to address straight off is this one Polish word that keeps being repeated throughout this book. And I'm probably going to butcher the pronunciation for any of the Polish people out there who may be listening, but I'm going to go with Srodowisko.
That's the way I've been pronouncing it. So I like it.
Okay, so I'm going to go with that. I'm just pronouncing it how it sounds as how it's written. So I think this word's really important, one, because it's repeated so many times, but it's about the meaning behind it as well. And it kind of sets a kind of theme for the whole book too. And I was reading this book on a Melbourne trip that I made, and I had a long train trip in front of me. So I was like, it's a perfect time to be reading this book. And I got really excited as I was reading it because I had just created in my own personal life a space in like my new home and a kind of like a new chapter in life where I was trying to invite a new kind of community into my life that I'd sort of been starting to yearn and look for. And I was trying to find other spaces that had either created this or could create this that I could join, and realized that just wasn't going to happen. I went, you know what, stuff it. Let's just do it myself. I'll do it myself. So I just kind of started to do that. And when the Swaffords write about Srodowisko, I'm reading it going, oh my goodness, like, yes, this is it. This is exactly what I've been like, what I have now tried to create without having word and language around what it was exactly that I was trying to do. So what does this word mean? Let's just translate it. It kind of translates to a little bit like the word milieu or environment. And that kind of comes from John Paul II's time, where he had a group of young people that was surrounding themselves, and they called themselves this. And they called themselves Srodowisko for a particular reason, because in their time they were under communist dictatorship. And for them, it meant that there was obviously a very stark suppression on who they were and who they were supposed to be allowed to be versus who they truly authentically are. And so for them, this created a community where they could authentically be who they truly were. But also in the presence of John Paul II, or Carol at the time, Carol Wojtyła at the time, this was elevated to a whole other kind of level. They were being accompanied by someone that we would later come to know as the great John Paul II. So, it created this environment for these young people where they could truly be who they were and could also truly grow from that space, because that's what a place like a milieu or an environment allows you to do. It allows for genuine growth. It allows for genuine relationship and fellowship to come about. And I think the way they describe it in the book too also places a kind of seriousness on this attitude that they had of Srodowisko, of being this group of people of Srodowisko. And I think that kind of makes sense when you place it in the context of World War II. But I think it's really important that we, as a people of today, don't then go, well, then it's not, I can't replicate it in my life, or it doesn't really matter as much in our lives. I think it matters just as much, because we're all fighting the same spiritual battle. The circumstances may have looked different, but we all have the same spiritual battle, same human nature, even though the times may be different, the places may be different, the situation that we're in may be different, but we all need it. We all need this Srodowisko in our own lives.
Absolutely. The necessity for an environment where we can kind of catch Christianity, right? Where we can catch Christianity more and more and become more like ourselves because of the people that we are engaged with. And that's totally.
A space for people who are on the same mission can actually come together and be in accompany each other, serve each other, encourage each other, help each other to grow. We actually need those spaces.
Too right.
Always.
Yeah, 100%.
So kind of moving from there then, we have these two words obviously in the title of the book, gift and grit. So I think maybe if we just spend a couple of minutes, why gift and grit? And then we might kind of jump into some other things. So firstly, gift. The Swaffords talk about gift being something that's really grounded by having this authentic meaning in our lives. And they do this thing in their book where they compare what it means to kind of make your own meaning in your life versus having something that's a bit more true and authentic and something else outside of just our own kind of made up, trying to put things together way of creating meaning. And it's when we have this really true and authentic understanding and appreciation of the meaning of our lives that we're actually able to then offer ourselves to another. And it's in that offering of ourselves that we then become a gift to another, which is why they've used gift as part of their title for this book. In this kind of Western way of being anti-religious in the culture that we have, we've kind of lost sense of this authentic meaning of gift. And we've kind of gotten to this place where we think, well, our lives just mean whatever we kind of make for it to mean. It's whatever I kind of choose my life to be. That's what my life means. So we all kind of have these different meanings of our lives that we get to create in some way, or that we get to set in some way, either because of I can create all of these accomplishments, that becomes the meaning of my life, or if I can achieve a certain status, or I can achieve a certain thing in the world, I can create something, then I've kind of had my meaning to my life fulfilled if I can complete this in some sort of way. So then we kind of make things like owning a business or having financial security or some sort of fame or societal mark, or even becoming a parent. We make all of those things the mark, the standard, either what's the word I'm looking for? The thing that we're aiming for, like that's the ceiling. That's as far as we can go because that's the purpose of our lives. That's what we're aiming for. And as soon as we've hit it, now I've achieved the meaning of my life. This is the very purpose for what I'm here on this earth to do. And these goals are beautiful. Like I don't want to make it sound like, oh, she's saying that we shouldn't have these goals. Like, is she saying that I shouldn't want to be a parent or something? I shouldn't want to make a societal difference. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying these are really beautiful. And the Swaffords aren't saying that either. They're saying these are really beautiful, but they're goals. That's it. They're just goals. They're not the actual meaning of our lives, and they shouldn't be the very core of our lives. Why? Because we won't take any of these goals into the next life. We won't take any of these achievements into the next life. We can't. So, we even hear in marriage vows, until death do us part. Right? So even that, is it meant for the next life in that way? These are just ways that we're being called by God, and very specifically and individually, each of us called, but they in themselves shouldn't be the very meaning of our lives.
No.
Because God reveals and gives the meaning of our lives to us. It's something that we actually receive from him. And ultimately that's for being in union with him.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's if our lives are fundamentally ordered and focused upon something that I achieve, then it's no longer focused on any gift-oriented purpose. It's become focused on without even realizing it. It's become focused on the self, and the self has, in a certain sense, taken the place of God. Swaffords also talk about grit, and this is sort of a firmness of mind or spirit, unyielding courage in the face of trial and hardship. It's virtue in action, but it's not just about acting virtuously. It's about being a virtuous person. Being a virtuous person, being someone who is courageous, someone who has persevered and continues to persevere. This is, and we can all sort of stop and identify someone in our lives who's like that, someone who sort of refuses to sort of lay down and just take the circumstances of life, someone who's willing to face reality front on, someone who is not going to give up, not going to play the victim, but is actually going to face the circumstances of life front on, and engage in the battle and engage in the drama that is life, and be prepared for difficulty and accept that the cross, difficulty, hardship, these are things that come with being a disciple, and I'm going to face these things. Not alone, but I'm going to face these things. And we can see this courage in Christ on the cross. He firmly and resolutely chose the cross every step to Calvary, and every step must have been excruciatingly difficult. It would have been painful beyond measure, but at no point did he go, no, I won't do it anymore. It's too hard. It's too far beyond me. This is courage and perseverance. And this is the kind of virtue that the kind of thing that we're meant to try and emulate in him. So gift and grit, making a gift of ourselves, and having with the grace of God, and with the grace of God, having the grit to face up to the circumstances of life in which we're able to make a gift of ourselves because we're facing life head on. So that sort of covers like the first 5 chapters of the book.
So why don't we then in this episode dive deeper into what is the friendship part of this book? Because what we'll do for the next couple of episodes is kind of split them up into 3 sections so we can cover the entirety of the book. But if we, maybe just move into some of the other chapters, particularly around friendship and male and female friendship.
Cool. Let's do it. So chapter 6 deals with, again, the question of friends and the necessity of friendship, friends sort of rubbing off on each other, being the formators of our character, and that deeper friendships require common realities, that we have certain things in common in the present, and that's actually quite important for our growth. This chapter actually reminds me a little bit of our prior book study from Erik Varden, Bishop Erik Varden from Norway. There's a sense in which there's a sense of the navigating of friendships, both old and new, and any friendships which may be dwindling probably have the quality of being anchored in the past. And this reminds me of Varden, because he talks about the importance of engaging with the present, engaging with reality as it is, and not looking back. He's saying he wants us to remember the past. He wants us to even bring the past into the present, but so that it can be redeemed by the Lord. But what he doesn't want us to do is to look back and long for what was, when the circumstances of the now demand response. And so he points out this by looking at Lot's wife, who looks back and as a result is turned into a pillar of salt, right? And he points out that Lot offers no leadership to his wife. He doesn't tell her why she has to look forward. Doesn't tell her why she can't look back. Doesn't say to her, "Listen, this is really serious. You're going to get turned into a pillar of salt. You're going to die. You're going to, And here's where we're going. By the way, we're going here. Let me tell you where we're going, so that you know. He offers no leadership in that sense. And so thus she looks back, not knowing where she's moving forward, right? Now, at this point, I'm in danger of giving another review of Eric Varden's book. So I don't want to do that. But
we'll just leave it with 5 stars.
I think what Andrew and Sarah really pick up on is that friendships ordered towards the past will always inhibit growth. Neither will be able to image to the other a relationship with Christ in the here and now, and this inhibits the ability of making oneself a gift. It also inhibits the ability of growing grit, since grit is born in the confrontation of the circumstances in the now, not in the nostalgia for the past.
Yeah. 100%. I can certainly say that from my own experience as well. My own personal experience, the closest friends that I've had. And we've led very different lives. We live in different places, even different states. Most of it we've been able to kind of keep in contact, being over the phone for, a couple of years at a time, all sorts of different things. We even have different spiritualities. We don't even have the same kind of expressions of spirituality. But for the ones that I'm thinking of, we all love and try to love Jesus better and more deeply each and every day. And that kind of that's become the core for our friendship. Yeah. That's what our friendship is based on, is that we're all pushing for the same thing. We're all wanting the very same thing, to love Jesus more. And I think because of that commonality and being sisters in Christ has kind of allowed us to do exactly what you just said, to not be kind of stuck in the past, not looking back on some event that we had together where we all went away on a high, even a church event that we all went on a high from. I think it's precisely because we're being formed in Christ together. Yes. That we can actually move forward together on the mission. But I think that's also what's allowed our relationship to become deeper and more real over the years as well. And I think this is the very reason why, when you have friendships that have this kind of a core, and when those friendships fall apart, because they still have the potential to fall apart if you don't, it's like any relationship, you don't sustain it, it will fall apart. That's the nature of it. And some of it is healthy. Sometimes some relationships do need to end at certain points, and that's okay. Yep. But that's the reality and nature of any relationship. But I think the ones that have been this close and has had Jesus at a core, they become the ones that are really painful as well. Yes. They hurt when they end. Yeah. Absolutely. And I like what you say there. Sometimes naturally friendships will come to an end, and that's okay. Because the number one friendship that we have, that we're meant to really
lean into is our friendship with Christ, right? And that's not saying that other friendships are not valuable. Therefore, that's not the point. In fact, that reality makes other friendships all the more valuable to some degree, right? But when we recognise that in fact all friendship must be ordered towards the ultimate friendship of Jesus Christ, we're actually willing to let friendships end naturally when necessary. And we're also willing to preserve and to sustain friendships as they grow. So it's a good thing. True friends. This is something that they say on. So I'm reading from the Kindle edition here, because I can't find my copy of the hard copy of the book, and it's signed by them as well. So I'm looking high and low, and I think I know where it is. I think it's at my parents' place. So I can kind of picture it on my desk, and I'm like, I'm sure if I go there, I'm going to find it. So it's a reason to go home next weekend, next Monday. But true friends see the same good and cherish the same truths. That's on page 73 of the Kindle edition. And that sort of summarizes the very point that you've made here very beautifully, that, the Swaffords make the point that we need workout partners. We partners in the game of life, so to speak. They sort of use athletics as a way of explaining this a little bit. And people who value and desire the true goods of our life, the true purpose of our life as much as we do. And yes, it's important that friends love us as we are. That's true, right? But we want friends who love us too much to leave us in that position. Like, we want friends who actually see what the end goal is and are like, no, I want to run and hurtle with you towards this goal of union with Christ in this life, starting in this life and culminating in the next. So it's I think that's a really important facet of friendship that they touch on, and they also touch on another aspect too, which is that one of the challenging tasks that we're going to face at some stage is being honest and authentic in assessing, do my friends desire what I desire?
Yep.
Right. And that can be a hard question to battle with.
Very confronting.
Right. Confronting. Yeah. Because often, perhaps in an attempt to fit in socially, we can try and straddle the line of disciple of Jesus and one of the boys, speaking from a masculine perspective here for a moment. Being authentic means assessing, do I actually want to be one of these boys? Is it maybe I need to recognize that this friendship has changed because I have changed. And that doesn't mean cutting all contact, never seeing those people again, being mean or nasty and like, no, I'm not talking to you anymore. It doesn't mean being that way, but I think it does mean intentionally altering the amount of time that one spends with the people we recognize as no longer being close friends. And on the basis of that very thing that I think the Swaffords point out almost at the beginning of the book, that you become like the 5 people you most hang around, it's and look, making that decision, there can be a certain level of grief on all sides. There can be a certain level of grief on the side of the friends that you've because I think it's important to actually have an honest conversation with those friends, not just to pull back and not say anything, but to actually have because that'd be weird, right? But to have an honest conversation, yeah, absolutely, right? So to have that honest conversation and be like, look, I've changed. I know it, you know it, and I don't think that we're on the same path. I don't think that we can be the running mates we were, and I still want to know what you're up to. I still, I care about you. I love you. but I don't think that we are the friends that we were. And to have that conversation, that's going to cause some grief. That's going to cause some sadness. And that's okay. That's okay. It's okay to grieve that. That's normal. As long as you let there be honesty, integrity, authenticity, this grieving will take a natural sort of path in our lives. That's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Moving from there, if we're looking into chapter 7, in this particular chapter, they also start to look at this idea of taking interest in someone else's life, and that in itself being an act of selflessness and an act of charity as well. And that there are beautiful fruits that come from that. But one of the things they point out is 3 things that become really essential in friendships. And I think it ties to what you were saying before as well. And the first one is availability. We actually do need to make ourselves available to meet people. I know that sounds too obvious, but it's true. Like, how often do we actually walk around the place with us looking down on our phones and scrolling away, as opposed to looking around to see who is around and who can I start to give eye contact to and smile at and wave at, and like, who do I keep consistently crossing paths with? Can I start like a brief conversation with them, just acknowledging, hey, we keep seeing each other. Like, we actually need to be aware of who's in our circle. And then it's actually on us to start to give our time and attention to that person or to those people. It's actually as well. That's the word. It's on us to actually be open. And I've heard from several people. I almost gave a talk on this last year. Have heard from several people that it's become almost church culture for a lot of people to become closed off to new friends. I've got my friends. I don't have time for any more friends. I don't have any more energy for any more friends. I don't want any more friends. So I'm just going to stick to my friends, and I'm not going to look around for anyone else. Like, I know there might be some people on the outside, but I don't have anything. It's very like, I'm diminished. I've nothing left. My cup is empty. I cannot do anything more. And there is probably some times where that's very appropriate response to have. But it worries me when that becomes our Christian attitude that we try to take, because it's not very Christian.
No, right.
It's not very Christ-like to say, I'm going to stick over here. I mean, imagine if the disciples did that. We've got Jesus over here and we're just going to hang out over here. I'm happy with my friends of 12. Like that disaster. It would have been an absolute disaster.
Yeah.
We're not called for that. But at the same time, I appreciate that we all go through seasons that are really tough and really hard, and we can't always be outward and active in going out and seeing people, but that doesn't mean that we can't be open to meeting people. I think there's a difference between actively putting energy out and pursuing versus being open to seeing what God has to offer. So that's availability. Absolutely. The second thing they talk about is vulnerability.
That's a scary word.
As we become more comfortable with the person and secure in that relationship, we actually need to start being more free to be open with our strengths and weaknesses and challenges in our lives. And that increases that sense of intimacy that we have with that person by allowing people to see into us. That, you know, we've talked about this several times on the podcast, into me see is where that whole intimacy idea is about. And there's different levels of appropriateness of intimacy as well. Always want to say that. So it's not appropriate to go and disclose your most deepest wounds and traumas after a couple of meetups of coffee. No. Don't do that. That's so inappropriate for the other person to receive and so inappropriate for us to give to them as well. It's too big, too soon. We need to test the waters. And that's not like gimmicky or uncharitable or anything like that either. That's actually how natural relationships grow. We test the waters by offering them a little piece and go, here's a little piece that's valuable It's not to minimize. It's not to show that I don't trust you or anything like that. It's to say, here's a little piece that I'm going to trust you with, and I'm just going to watch and see what you do with that. I trust you with this little piece. This little piece is still important to me, but it's a little piece. So I'm going to give you a little piece, and then I'm going to see what you do with it. Can you hold it? Can you respond to me with charity? Or will you look at me and judge me? Will you hold me in a weaker space? Will you try to give me advice and problem solve my life away? Or will you hold me as someone who is empowered, who can actually make my own decisions, but I'm offering you a chance to see into my life, to vulnerably see me. So it's about testing them, but it also means that the other person who is receiving it can go, can I do this? They can also hold on to the piece and go, ooh, okay, am I ready to be the person who can see a little bit more of that person? Am I ready to guard this for them? Do I have what it takes to hold this privacy for that person?
Yeah.
Do I have the skills to now continue to encourage that person to see into that? And am I willing to give now a piece of me to that other person?
And
am I willing to reciprocate? Or maybe not yet.
Yeah.
That's the other scary part, is when people become vulnerable, there's this little thing that goes, it may be you next. When you're ready, at whatever capacity you want. Doesn't mean you have to spill the beans, but there is a reciprocal that generally comes about, and to different levels.
Exactly. According to appropriateness, as you say. Yeah. Definitely.
And then there's a third part.
So this third part is accountability, right? So friends have the power to empower or enable their friend, and when we allow someone to be our close friend, we're giving them the opportunity to speak into our lives. And we need to ensure that both of us have the same truth, and not just society's version of my truth and your truth, right? That both of us actually recognize that there is an objective truth. And ultimately the truth has a name, and his name is Jesus Christ. We need to be aware of that. So that becomes essential, because part of friendship is upholding the other to the standard and the mission of becoming more like Jesus Christ, of being another Christ in the world. It means that when we see the face of Christ in our friends, we should tell them, hey, I just saw something epic take place. I just saw something amazing happen in you, and I want to tell you about it. Equally, when we see something less than that, when we see something that doesn't measure up to the standard of our Lord Jesus Christ, we also need to say, hey, I just saw something here that concerns me. I want to share that with you. Not in a judgmental way, not in a way of superiority, but in a way that demonstrates genuine care for the other, that you would expect a friend to show. So that level of accountability, and this is essentially, it's basically the accountability. I love, because it's such a concrete expression of the responsibility that necessarily flows from love. In all of its various forms. Yeah.
I also, just listening to, I also love that there's no greater love than to lay down your life for your friends.
Yes. Yeah. That's it.
I think it's so, Jesus has kind of elevated friendship there. And I think it's so special, important, and powerful to acknowledge that, because he didn't say there's no greater love than to lay down your life for your cousins. He didn't say there's no greater love than to lay down your life for your brothers. There's no greater love than to lay down your life for your parents. He said friends. And I think friendship has the capacity to surpass all other kinds of stereotypes and limitations. And it's not bound by race. It's not bound by ethnicity and culture. It's not bound by age. It's not bound by occupation. It's not bound by bloodline. There's no restrictions on what friendship, on who two people can be who can enter into a friendship. Particularly
in friendship in Christ, right? Because there's a there's an old quote. Normally, it's I'm sure you've all heard it before. Blood is thicker than water, right? That quote is not actually the quote at all. The way that we sort of understand that quote is, well, family is first. Blood's thicker than water. That's complete opposite meaning of the original quote, right? The original quote is, the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb, which was used by soldiers on the battlefield initially as a way of expressing their relationship to each other. That they had a special bond together. Well, so do we. We have a special bond as well. One that is forged in the blood of a covenant by a God who loved us so much that he shed his own blood to forge it. So Christian friendship has this. I think, it has. It has been elevated to this level. He says, you can lay down your life for your friends. Why? Because it is friendship in me. That's why there's no greater love to lay down your life for your friends, because it's not any friendship. It's friendship in me. I think that's yeah.
I think this is kind of why I love Sarah's work. Anything Sarah touches is just gold to me. I mean, partly because she's just, she's a total rock star, so that kind of helps. But it's her ability to put things so simply and so clearly. Like just reading that section on availability and vulnerability and accountability, I'm like, yes, yes, this just makes so much sense, and you can see it so clearly. And because I was formed by Sarah's work very early on, like many years ago, I started to apply her work to my life very early on, and I saw fruit straight away. I can vouch this stuff works. Like it hands down absolutely works, and it makes things clearer, easier to navigate. And it's also meant that the friendships that I have been able to go to a place that I don't think it would have gone to if we couldn't have had conversations on availability and vulnerability and accountability and use those words, not just, I'll just make myself available. Like I'll just call them now and see what they're doing, or, they're coming for a visit. Yeah, I'll just actually using that language and talking to them and saying, you know what, don't think I've been all that available to you in the last 6 months. I've just noticed that I've been really preoccupied in my own stuff, and I just want to acknowledge that I've not been there for you. So I'm just putting it out there. What's that impact been like on you? And then kind of waiting and for them to, kind of come back with, actually, yeah, you haven't been, but I also respect that you've had a lot on your plate right now, but also I haven't been available to you either. So now we've got like language around what's going on, instead of just kind of sitting in the background and going, I don't know, is something going on with them? I don't know. Maybe I said something. Maybe they said something. There's none of this ambiguity, none of this, no room for drama to come about when you can have such clarity, and there's so much good fruit that comes from that clarity as well.
Absolutely, and that's beautiful. I can remember you putting, I remember you beginning to interact with that, and with Sarah's work, and it's I saw the excitement and the certainty that you had that, hey, this is good stuff. This is the stuff that we need to be getting out there because it works, and The one thing, just one last thing on this chapter that I would like to point out is that one of the important things that Sarah and Andrew point out is that in terms of availability, it's important to allow God to surprise you. Sometimes we might make ourselves available, but not really. Like it's available to a certain class of citizen, sort of like.
Yep.
Do you go to the Latin Mass?
Yeah.
Or do you like that's we unfortunately that's the way that we often make ourselves available, which isn't really available at all, right? So allow God to surprise us. We ought to allow him to surprise us and to be open to forming friendships with people that we've looked at that go, okay, that's a very different spirituality to mine. That's a very different way of expressing the faith than I would have thought of. This is someone who has a different way of looking at the world than I typically do, or a very different family dynamic he's come from. Well, that's okay. That's okay. This person has a very different personality. Thank God.
Yeah.
That's great. You know, let's explore what that's going to look like. You know, so
there's just so much around surprise, or the element of surprise. For some people, surprise can be really anxiety provoking.
Sure.
Surprise, random, come out. No, I didn't see it coming. I need more control. So there could be some things in that to work through, right? Like there's that element. But I also think there's something really beautiful. Like I experienced this, and even just recently I experienced this with my parents visiting. They were very like, what would you like me to bring? What would you like us to bring for you? And I'm like, I don't want anything. I just want you guys here. But no, we'd like to bring you something. Well, then surprise me.
Yeah.
Like just bring whatever. And we almost like, why can't we just say that in our prayer? Why can't we just talk to God about that and just say to him, Lord, I listened to this podcast earlier.
Surprise me. Yeah.
You know what? Yeah. Surprise me. Just, you know what I can handle. You know what I can and can't, deal with.
It's great.
Surprise me. Show me if there's someone you want me to meet, someone different, someone new. Just surprise me.
Let's do it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
This leads us to chapter 8, which is, can men and women be friends? Dun, 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 dun.
Dun, dun.
The question we dare not speak of. Well, Andrew and Sarah do, and we ain't frightened of it either. Look, a few years back, I can actually remember seeing Sarah. It was on the YouTube. Oh my gosh, I sound like an old man.
Yeah, I know. You sound so old on
what's
the
wrong
YouTube.
with me? I can remember it was on YouTube. I can remember seeing Sarah and a bunch of Catholic speakers on a Q&A panel. It was some YouTube video. And the question was asked, can men and women be friends? And one fellow on this panel just flat out said no, because men are oriented towards biological union with women, and so it's impossible for women, and women are highly emotional creatures, and so it's impossible for men and women to be friends. End of story, full stop, that's it. And I can recall Sarah's reaction. Her reaction said everything. Like, you just see it in her eyes that she's like, what did you just say? What was that? And now she gave a very good and a measured response, which was very respectful of her fellow panelist, right? I can't actually remember exactly what she said, but the answer in this book would have been something like it, I'm sure. And the answer in this book is excellent and very useful. Quoting from them, on page 102 in the Kindle version, men and women are not the exact same, and yet they can be friends. Or as they say on page 105 of the Kindle edition, men are not just sexual robots with no feelings, and women are not just a bundle of emotions with no sexual desires, right? We're more than that. And I think that this whole thing of, oh no, men are oriented towards biological union, women are highly emotional. It's not only is it a reductionistic view of male and female and the complementarity that exists between them, right? It's also just, it lacks common sense. I think it also lacks common sense because it winds up adopting a position that says that sexual disintegration is the natural state of the human person, is the normal state of the human person, that we are simply sexually disintegrated and there's not a single thing that we can do about it. That's how it's going to be. So we need to act accordingly. That's essentially
just
what it
biology.
says.
Just biology.
Right. And not even it's just it's just biology. I'm just a slave. I'm a slave to what's going on internally. So I think that's worth pointing out there. And as they say, men and women are different. I mean, I know. Right? Aren't we all just shocked and amazed? And so we do need to recognize that in the context of friendships. There's a study referenced by the Swaffords that shows that men are quicker to view their female friends as potential romantic partners, and they tend to overestimate how much their female counterpart shares that attraction. At the same time, females tend to underestimate the romantic attraction their male friends feel towards them, since they assume that their own lack of interest is reciprocated. So now, are these challenges? Yeah, absolutely they are. Should they stop us from pursuing healthy male-female friendships? No, not at all. We'll see why soon. But before we get there, let's look at a serious challenge to male-female friendships, which is the utilitarian ethic, use.
Yeah. So I think we've all heard it said before that this idea that men will use love to get sex and women will use sex to get love. It's a very old saying that's been going around for a long time. And initially the things that stand out to people when you sort of see that at first is men will use love to get sex. Okay, love to get sex. And then women will use sex to get love. Okay, that's the problem. That's the big problem. So we hyper-focus on love and sex and the ordering of it. When actually the problem isn't those two at all.
Yeah.
The problem is the word use. The idea is that men will use one thing to be able to get another from women, and women will use one thing to be able to get another from men.
Right.
It's the fact that we're wanting to use each other that becomes the problem. So what we're actually asking in this question when it comes to can men and women be friends then, what we're really asking is it possible for a man to want to be friends with a woman without wanting something sexual out of that relationship? And is it possible for a woman to want to be friends with a man without wanting something romantic out of the relationship? That really is the question that we're asking when people go, there's no way that men and women can be friends. And it all boils down to whether we are capable or not of using the opposite sex, or if we're just kind of biologically wired to use each other. And if it's purely that we're biologically wired and this is just the way it goes, we have a huge problem. Huge problem on our hands if this is just the way that things go. Because if it's just biological hardwiring, all our marriages would be a total disaster, including every faithful married couple would be going through huge disasters if they're unable to look at the opposite sex in any other way than to be able to use them.
Absolutely.
It also means that men and women can't work together on church projects at all. Like, how are we supposed to do that without using each other if that's purely the only way forward? And like, as I'm saying that, I'm hoping that you're going, that is too extreme, Stina. It's way too extreme. Like, we're a little bit more moderate than that. Well, hang on. If we're a little bit more moderate than that, then that says that there is actually something else that's an option there. There is this possibility for something more pure. Then there's possibility there for something more beautiful than this particularly extreme view.
Yeah. Yep.
And I think the thing is that, you know, this other concept that we have when we talk about this in virtue ministry, we used to, at least when we did youth ministry, we talked about the opposite of love. And generally people will go, the opposite of love is hate.
Like clockwork,
it's actually not hate. Yeah. Hate is pretty far on the other end of the spectrum of love. Yes, it's true. But use is what's on the absolute opposite end of love. And so if we've actually been called to love one another, then it means that we actually have another way out of not using one another.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's the utilitarian thing is this is the great problem, right? If we're using someone, then it is completely contrary to love. And as you rightly say, either we're capable or we're simply wired that way. I think what you've revealed there, and what Sarah and Andrew very beautifully reveal there, is that use is, as you rightly point out, either it's hardwired or it's a capability we have. It's something that we can do, right? Something that we can actually morally choose. Not that it's a moral choice to make, but something that we can choose as moral agents, right?
Yeah.
So that's something that
we actually have the power to exercise our free will.
Right, exactly. And therefore we have the power to exercise love. We have the power to exercise reason and to actually take our desires and to submit them to our reason and our will. That's something that we can do. We don't need to be bound by them. Andrew and Sarah, they both propose that there's a mindset which will guard against the pitfall of use, the pitfall by which we seek to use another. And they call it living on a mission. And as we go through this, one thing that's going to be important to bear in mind is that it's not to be abused as a way to find a partner. So by what the Swaffords call living on a mission is being centered in wanting the good for the other, even to the point of sort of discomfort of self, the sacrifice of one's own desires and wants. Men who have their gaze fixed on Christ should be aware of their internal reality when they are attracted to a woman, that they are able to use that information to make decisions that are good for her and for him, right? And there are so many ways that this example can be, that this reality can be lived out. Like, the first might be, wow, she is beautiful. She's stunning. But you know what? She's not for me. So what have I got to do? What's my duty here? All right, I have to protect her dignity. I have to look after her. How do I look after her? Well, I can stop ogling her for a start. Okay, good thing. And sort of making those good decisions, even though it might be uncomfortable to start with. Okay, do it anyway, right? But also it might be, wow, isn't she stunning? Isn't she gorgeous? Isn't she wonderful? And do you know what? I'm going to ask her out. Yep, absolutely, 100%. That's what I'm going to go and do. I'm going to go and, not me, obviously, but male man that we're talking about. I'm going to go and ask her out, right? That's good, excellent, right? But alternatively, it might be, okay, this is my friend. This person's my friend, and I'm experiencing these feelings, and they're not going away. They're actually quite persistent. I think I need to be open and honest about that, and I think we need to maybe create a bit of distance here, because neither of us are in a position at this stage where we can actually commit to anything like this at the moment. So we need to have a further conversation about that's called being aware of what's going on inside and acting responsibly, right? And loving the other despite the discomfort that it might have. Yeah. And I think they've even given a name for that, which is friends in motion, right? Which is, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. Yep.
So
having the self-knowledge and then acting on love with love, acting on that in some way, is that motion happening? Something is in movement there.
Right, exactly. And essentially recognizing that because we are living on a mission, because we are living for Christ, everything must be ordered towards him in that way. And so long as he's our final end, we can do those things. Those things I just spoke about, we can do those. It's doable.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And for women as well, like we obviously talked there's a couple of things there for men. For women, as women, we actually need to have our gaze fixed on Christ, so that, and so fixed so that we can actually become aware of what our internal reality is, so that when we find moments of temptations where we might have like an emotional void that we want filled, we don't call our male friends. We don't call on them to come in to try and fill that in the name of friendship, which is what the Swaffords point out in this book. because we're then trying to create, we're then actually creating an idea in the man's mind that there is potential for something else here, but we actually don't have any desire for anything else. We just have a short-term yearning that can't be filled, and then we're trying to fill it with somebody else instead of trying to fill it with Christ, who can satisfy all those yearnings. And that takes a whole other level of self-knowledge for women to be aware of that. And I think one of the things that the world is slightly outside of the church, the world as a whole is starting to recognize is that men and women have very different chemical cycles. And so what tends to happen for men is there's a reset every 24 hours. That doesn't happen for women. It's a lot longer for women. So we need to acknowledge that there are certain times in our cycle where we're going to be more tempted in certain ways, or we're going to feel more vulnerable in certain ways. And we need to be the ones to be able to see that as women, to be able to see that, acknowledge that, and then respond to that. Not suppress it, not shame it, not dismiss it, none of that stuff. It's all there. It's good and beautiful. It's part of our design. See it for what it's meant to be there for. But then don't try and use men to fill those gaps where they're not meant to. That's not what they were made for. It's not what men were made for. We don't want to toy with men's hearts like that. But those are the places where Christ wants to come and fill them. Those are the places that he has the words, the comfort, the love, the peace, the security. He has everything we need to fill every one of those moments. He's there, all there. It's just kind of like, please don't call on somebody else. Like, I'm right here. I'm right here with you. Just let me be here with you. You just have to invite Jesus into it.
Yes, 100% yes. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Well...
Yeah.
First 8 chapters.
So there you go. There was, woo! That's a very long episode, but it's a really good book. So
it is.
Go and have a read of Gift and Grit by Dr. Andrew and Sarah Swafford. It is really, really good. It's a short book because I don't read anything that's super thick and super long. I don't have the time or the space for it. But go and have a read of it. It's super, super good. Very easy to read. Take it with you on your transport, your travels, whatever, as you're traveling from A to B. Really, really easy to read. Yep. So we're going to end this, and then we have 2 parts to go. They will be shorter than this episode, I promise you, the next 2 episodes to come. And we will have we will have co-hosts for the next 2 episodes. So stay tuned for that as well. But before we go, Padre, really quickly, a truth, beauty and goodness from you.
Absolutely. For me, it is a resource. It's loving God's children and the church and gender ideology. It's quite topical for the moment and for the world in which we presently live. It's a book that I started ages ago, and I started going through it, and I'm like, this is actually a pretty good book. I like it. And then I just didn't get around to reading it, to reading the whole thing. So I'm restarting it now, and it really is quite brilliant and insightful. So if you're wondering how can we get to know more about the church's response to gender ideology and some of the challenges that sit around that, that's going to be helpful.
Epic.
And yourself, Stina?
For me, it was a recent opportunity where I got to hang out with some people over brunch. I had breakfast with some of my VM teammates, which was awesome, really cool. And then I got to head away and kind of have morning tea with another group that I'd been working with and have almost brunch with them before I kind of hit the road. So it was just fun to kind of hang out with these people that you get to work with and don't live in the same place, so you don't get to catch up with very easily. But we were all kind of able to sit around the same table and just kind of debrief and chat. And it was just, it's just that fellowship. Christian fellowship and just being able to sit in there. That was huge. You all did really well. Thanks so much for working together as a team. Let's take a break and then let's do it again.
Praise God.
That's awesome. That kind of a space. So really, really awesome.
That's really beautiful.
Yeah. Alrighty, we will catch you again next week. But until then, know our love and prayers.
God bless.